I'll go first and then throw it to you, Jack. I thrived on it, to be honest, Georgia, because I was really looking for I wanted to do something hard and I wanted to do something purposeful, and TFA delivered for me. But what I also found was that because I'd had that experience being a lawyer, and I also had a stint in television as well, so I was teaching media, having that credibility was super important in the classroom. Like if you can stand up in front of your year 12 legal studies class and say, you know what, I've actually been yelled at by a judge, or I once had a client in this area, or here's how this actually works in practice. It's you get a lot of credibility. The study, in terms of adjusting to that, I didn't also find it too bad because, as you've probably done your professional legal training as well, whilst you were trying to get admitted. So I found that a pretty good process as well. Probably the most jarring thing for me was moving from the city to a Victorian regional area. That was the part that was the adjustment for me. I really enjoyed it, but it was nevertheless an adjustment. What about you, Jack?
I probably didn't have that much of a head start in my other career, like only working for a year as an accountant. So I probably wasn't as invested, but I think it was kind of a breath of fresh air for me to actually get into something and be interested in what I was doing and want to improve and see how that improvement directly affected the classroom and students as well. So it was just a lot more, I guess, gratifying and purposeful for me as well. I found the studying really challenging because of the, I guess, commitment and the responsibility of teaching, over 100 kids and wanting to do the best you possibly can, but then also knowing that you need to be making sure you're giving time to make sure you're passing your subjects can be a bit overwhelming at points, but you kind of get into a rhythm eventually, and I was able to overcome that. But yeah, that was probably the biggest challenge for me was balancing school along with study. So it probably depends what it is. I mean, so when you come to the school, you're treated as a new teacher. And as a new teacher, I mean, schools aren't just going to be like, all right, good luck, see you later. They're going to be checking in with you pretty regularly, or they should be. You'll have an in-school mentor who you can bounce questions off and see how you're going. Who I used a bit. I was probably lent on Nick a bit more, I think, as a support. So Nick was probably coming in and observing classes every 2 to 3 weeks, I would say. And I'd ask him, and between that, if I was having trouble with a class or wanted some extra material that I was struggling with, I'd talk to Nick and he'd get me in contact with people who could help me or help me himself. So they're probably the two biggest supports, but you are like the first lesson, you go into the class and it's probably, unless you're getting observed, it's just going to be you and you kind of work off that. So it is a bit different to other jobs where you might get, steadily dropped in, you're kind of in there, you're the responsibility, but you've also got all these constructs around you to kind of reach out to get help from. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Jack.
Can I build off that as well? Because I think Jack's absolutely right in terms of that formal support, but also the importance of your individual reflection too. And you can tell that I'm the head of recruitment because I keep kind of alluding to our competencies, but again, just to bring that to life about why we look for some of the traits and qualities that we do. One of our competencies is learning and self-evaluation. And I think having that ability to accurately reflect at the end of every lesson, to think about, well, what has gone well? What have my students learned and engaged, and what could be better, is really going to impact your own development. And secondly, I think something that we probably don't talk about enough is the informal support of your peers and your colleagues. So there's a reason that we place quite a lot of emphasis on building a community of people, and you'll be in a cohort of people that are going through that experience. And that's one of the reasons why those 6 weeks of initial training are residential, because it's a really great opportunity to foster connections that truly are going to be the people that you're going to call up when you've had a nightmare day, or when you're wanting to share resources with someone, or really think about how you can approach and tackle a challenge. So I think in addition to that formal support, it's the support of your peers that truly will become just critical forms of support, not only during the 2 years of the program, but many of our associates talk about how they are friends for life through this journey.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Some of my best friends now in Melbourne are people I went through the program with, and we weren't placed in the same region. Some of them were placed in Portland. I was in Ararat, somewhere in Metro, and I know it's the same for Jack there as well. We did answer that question with Alison. Kathy, do you want us to elaborate? She's written, I heard that the rate that TFA graduates leave the profession is higher than other mainstream pathways. I'll just address that though. That's incorrect. Jen and I got some data on this through the week. 83% of our associates are in education, in the education field. 70% remain in the classroom teaching, people like Jack. That's higher than the traditional pathway. So it's not correct to say that our associates leave the profession in higher numbers. Kathy, did you want us to elaborate on the support that's provided to associates at all?
Yes, please.
What would you like to hear more about?
So, is there anything ongoing, like any ongoing support while you're in the classroom?
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, great question. The Teaching and Leadership Advisor from Teach for Australia, you get throughout the 2 years. Your academic mentor and your in-school mentor remain in place throughout the duration of the 2-year program. And Jack might want to comment on this as well. Over the 2 years, the role of the Teaching and Leadership Advisor at Teach for Australia changes. So a lot of, at the start, it can be like, try this. This might work for behaviour management. You might want to consider this sort of activity. Over the course of 2 years, the models sort of support and challenge. So initially it's very supportive, and then it becomes more challenging the associate to reflect themselves, to come up with those solutions, to think about things from a different angle, to grow those student aspirations or academic achievement or things like that. But the support models that we have are in place for over the 2 years.
Yeah. I think probably like I said, probably my biggest support was Nick as TLA. And I think that probably in the first 6 months, it was definitely a lot more of, to be like brutally honest, survival mode. Just what can I do to get through the classes and make sure I'm doing the best job I possibly can, and kind of really just peppering him with questions and asking for solutions. And then that kind of probably morphed in the second part of the year, and especially into my second year, as me coming to him with different ideas and him as more of a sounding board on what I could do. And he might come back with something else or say, that's good, or offer some suggestions. But it was definitely more of a, kind of advisory role with me kind of stepping in a bit more. Does that make sense?
Yes, when I went through the program and when Jack went through the program, yes, we did. But I think based on the feedback we've given over time, that's no longer the case. Although sometimes things will pop up at schools but yeah, I mean, I certainly found when I went through the program that sometimes an assignment would pop up at a very inconvenient time when reports were due. But I do know the university has made a big effort to try to avoid that now. Did you find that too, Jack?
Yeah, that definitely happened at different points. I mean, there's always going to be something popping up. But I think on the whole, major assessments were kind of timed for parts of the holidays and things like that. And you had a lot of lead up into it. So you could, as long as you're on top of what was coming up, you could kind of manage what's happening. But that's, probably being organised and knowing what's coming up at school and in uni is a pretty useful skill to develop.
Yeah, Yeah, Christine, we one of the competencies we look for is planning and organisation, and I think the people who use their 0.2, so their full day off or their 2 half days, it's generally manageable with on the uni side. But let me tell you, it's super tempting on if you have like a Friday afternoon off to just sit on the couch, open a bottle of red wine, and binge watch Tiger King. But it's much better in the long term if you use the time that you have and devote it to your studies.
Yeah, so with curriculum, I remember that being a really big stress for me before going to my school, because you just want to be trying to be as prepared as possible. And definitely in the 6 weeks, you are going through curriculum and different points, but it's pretty unrealistic and it's not expected even for a graduate teacher who's had their full qualification just be across the whole curriculum. When you go into a school, there will have, I mean, for the vast majority of cases, there will be resources and some form of curriculum there. How strong that is will depend, unfortunately, depending on the school that you're going to. But I think it's kind of as you're going along throughout the year, that's when you kind of become more familiar with the curriculum. And obviously, after you get at the end of your second year, you're going to have a bit more of definitely a far stronger understanding of the curriculum at different levels. But it probably is more as you're going throughout the year is when you kind of pick up more of the intricacies. But the school supports a lot with that, I would say.